screen. All right, so everybody should be able to see my first slide there, and we will get started. My name is Christine. I'm the Family Services Coordinator with the Oakville Parent-Child Center, and thank you for being here today on this beautiful day. Finally, I think hitting the double digits outside. And we're going to talk a little bit about our toddlers and our preschool sleep. So what brings me to this passion of talking about sleep is I am certified as a gentle sleep coach. So that's really what brings me to being able to talk to you about this topic today. And what we're going to do is we're going to be covering a few topics. So we're going to talk a little bit about sleep averages. We're going to talk about the dreaded bedtime delay, which is quite popular for our toddlers and our preschoolers. We're going to talk about routines. We're going to talk about potentially transitioning from a crib to a bed. We're going to talk a little bit about naps. And then we're going to wrap it up at the end is what gentle sleep coaching looks like at this age and how you might implement a bit of a sleep plan. So we're going to move along, and and at the very end, we're going to have a little time for questions and answers at the end. So if you have some questions and answers, feel free to pop them into the chat along the way, or you can save it to the end of the presentation as well. So let's get started. There we go. All right, sleep averages. So what are we looking at here? So when we're talking about sleep today and the ages today, we're talking about children sort of between the ages of 1.5 to about 3.5 years old. And this is a little bit of an idea of what sleep might look like for your child, or potentially what the goals are for sleep. At 1 to 1.5, we're really looking at kids that are taking 2 naps a day is what's recommended. A lot of kids by the age of 1 or just thereafter do drop down to 1 nap a day. Part of that is sometimes to accommodate childcare. A lot of our childcare programs are offering those little ones a 1 nap a day. So anywhere between 1 and 2 naps a day is what's recommended. You're looking at about 11 hours of nighttime sleep, and you're looking at about a total sleep within a 24-hour period of about 13 to 13.5 hours. So that age, you really do still need to keep at least 1 nap in there in order to be able to achieve those sleep totals. From 1.5 to 2.5, we're still recommending that kids have 1 nap that's about 2 to 2.5 hours. It's a pretty good solid nap. And that helps to obviously get them through the rest of their day and their afternoon. You're still looking at about around 11 hours of nighttime sleep and a total of as well 13 to 13 hours within a 24-hour period. And then from 2.5 to 3.5, this is a little bit more questionable, but it is recommended to have 1 nap still. A lot of kids, you might fight the nap in this age group. It might be a little bit more challenging. I'm really finding more and more that not all kids need the same amount of sleep, right? So it really does depend on the child, but if you're not having a nap, you'd certainly want to be aiming for some sort of a quiet time. So the opportunity is there to take a nap if need be. And at this age, you're looking for about 10.5 hours of nighttime sleep, and total sleep between in 24 hours is about 11.5 to 12 hours in total. So that's a little bit about sleep averages and what we're aiming for. So looking onto this routine matters. It really is an important conversation when it comes to sleep, but also to the entire day, because what's happening with our children is at this age, obviously they don't have the ability to tell time. But they do have an idea of the concept of time, and that's why routine matters so much. They're really thriving on that routine. They're thriving on the routines for naps, for bedtime, for snacks, eating, all of those kinds of things in order to, better prepare them for, that dreaded bedtime that we'll talk about. Some of the things that you want to be thinking about is that you have no screen time at least 1 hour prior to bedtime. So, and ideally longer. So that's really, really important. What's happening when our children are in front of screens is it's actually leading towards producing cortisol rushes. Blue light in general is scientifically proven to produce cortisol. So you want to prevent that when you're nearing the bedtime. You want to make sure that you've got an environment where you're dimming the lights down around the house. You're a little bit quieter. You're not going into this big rambunctious, crazy time, right at that bedtime. You want to make sure that things are calmer and you're setting the stage for that idea of sleep coming. So routine matters, again, giving it your time, energy, and attention. So this is challenging because when we've got 2.5 to 3.5-year-olds, let's say, this very end of the day time can be very, very challenging for us as parents. But attempting to put the cell phone away, turn the TV off, and giving that last hour of the day your full attention will do nothing but be rewarding for you in the end. So it will feel good. Combined with it's actually very, very beneficial to the child. This is one of the reasons that our kids are challenged at bedtime, is because they're facing this time of separation. So if you're giving them that attention for that last hour of the day, you're helping to fill that need for them. The next point here is the pre-sleep routine, including bath, and I've written sometimes, quiet time, teeth, PJs, massage, all of that is really important as well. So when I talk about the pre-sleep routine, I'm talking about that, let's say 1 hour prior to bedtime. So the screens are away, the TVs are off, that kind of thing. And you want to have a routine here as well, so that your child, again, at this older age, who is thriving on that routine, but not necessarily able to tell time, is preparing their body and their brain for sleep is coming next. And I've written including bath here sometimes because not all children need a bath every night, but also you want to still be aware at this age of your child's sleepy cues. So if you've got a night where they're showing, extra signs of extra tiredness and they're feeling exhausted, you may need to eliminate one of these things in the routine and jump to the end of the routine. So you've still got a bit of it, because you want to make sure that you're not prolonging the bedtime if their body is showing you they're already tired. So you may or may not always have a bath in there. The other thing about bath is something to keep in mind is that we're actually increasing our body temperatures when we're having a bath. So you may have a child that does better including the bath in the daytime or first thing in the morning. And so it may not be something that you do in the evening. When I talk about bedtime routine now, rather than the pre-sleep routine, this is key. So I talk about the final bedtime routine of the last 4 to 5 minutes prior to going into their bed as being very, very 100% consistent. You don't change this up even if it is one of those tired days. And what you're going to do is you're going to set yourself a routine. So it might be, 2 books, cuddles, a kiss, a song, and, lights out and the blankets are, you're being tucked in. And you want to follow that that routine very, very specifically every single night. And what's happening here, even with adults, is that when you have a final bedtime routine, it actually triggers the brain to it's now time to sleep. And when that brain is triggered to it's now time to sleep and you're following that routine, we're also telling our brain to produce melatonin. So it's actually a win-win here for having that very solid bedtime routine in place. The next thing is to have a consistent environment in the bedroom through until morning. And so what this means, again, is a little bit about how you put your child to bed at bedtime. So if you've got a very dim night light in the corner, let's say. Ideally not blue light, again, not bright white light. It's you're looking for a yellow or even a pinky toned light if you can. Find one of those night lights. And maybe the door is cracked open a tiny bit to the hallway. So then the lights in the hallway ideally are either turned off, because you're not likely to leave them on all night unless, again, it's a very dim light. So you're keeping that consistency through the night. So if your child has a white noise machine and the night light on and the door cracked open, you don't want to, let's say at 10 o'clock when you go to bed, you want to avoid turning that night light off. The sound machine has turned off automatically because it's on a timer, and the hall lights are now off. Because what we want to have happen is the way our child falls to sleep at bedtime is what they're going to need when they're falling asleep again, and let's say a sleep wake up at 2 a.m. So if they need white noise and they need a night light to help them feel calm and safe, then they're going to still need that at 2 in the morning. So you don't want to have any changes to what the environment looks like. And we can talk about that a little bit more if there's any questions that arise from that. All right. Okay, so just one more, please, mommy and daddy, or whoever is putting you to bed, please, please, please. Our kids at this age are, they're famous for being amazing at procrastinating. I want to go pee. I need to have a drink of water. I have to go to the bathroom. I need my snuggly. I want one more kiss. All of these kinds of things, and it's just what they do. No child really wants to go to bed. It's it's part of the process of being a kid. This is what they're supposed to do. They're gonna procrastinate here a little bit. So what's happening here is the number one thing is this: our child is facing a time of separation. So they know they're headed into a situation where they're potentially away from you because they're in their own room or their own bed or whatever it may be, and they're not right with you. They feel like they're missing out on something, and they're going to do everything in their power to procrastinate and see what buttons they can push. So what's happening here is our goal is to support the process of getting to a state of activated sleep. So that's why in the previous slide, I talked a little bit about being fully present. Our child really needs us at this time. And the payoff is there if you invest solidly into that last 45 minutes to an hour of being present with your child, so that this time of separation is less harmful. And well, not necessarily the word harmful is right, but they're not feeling it as much because they've spent quality time with you leading up until bedtime. So that's super important. There's going to be lots of requests. There's going to be a situation here where we start to question ourselves as parents, because how do we negotiate? No, you're not going to go to the bathroom. You don't need to pee, because it's kind of one of those things that, well, it might just get me in the long run because they may really need to pee. So how do you know? So this is a really hard thing on us as parents. You have to play with it a little bit. I mean, you have to get to know your child, and did they just literally use the washroom and have a pee 10 minutes before? Well, then you might know, okay, this is our child starting to procrastinate, and you can talk to them a little bit. Well, you were just in the bathroom. You can make sure you prepare ahead of time. So meet the needs of the child. And the trick here is before they ask. So if 5 nights in a row they've asked for a glass of water, then you might decide to keep a glass of water beside their bed. So you're making sure that you're prepared before them, and you're meeting the needs before them. And what this also does then is it lets the child know that you are fully present and you're able to meet that need without them actually even having to push for it. And so there we go. Parent must take the lead in this situation. All right. So part of the situation here, like again, talking about why there's so much procrastination is this situation where our children are naturally feeling this time of separation and they don't want to be separated from you. And so we need to talk about how do we keep them feeling comforted and close, even though we are physically separated from one another at this bedtime and throughout the night. What are some things we can do to comfort them and reinforce that we're still here? So really touch into all the senses. So you're thinking about the sense of touch, smell, sight, and sound here. So what are the ways that you can provide for your child the opportunity to be reminded that you are close? So for touch, you might give them something of yours. Maybe you're giving them, and that's going to be the smell part too. So a lot of kids might like to sleep with a parent's t-shirt, or maybe you had a stuffed toy in your bed and you let them have it for, after you've had it in your bed for a period of time, it actually smells like you. So the other thing to do is, again, talking about that hall door open. If the bedroom door is open to the hallway, they can hear you a little bit. Again, you're doing this before they ask. You could say to them at bedtime, I'm going to shout out to you in 5 minutes, I love you, or sleep tight, or something like that. And so in time, if you actually do that within 5 minutes, that'll be part of their sleep routine, but you're reassuring them that you're not far and that they're not alone and that you're still there for them. The other thing that you can do is tell your child that you're going to check on them before you go to bed. And this is really reassuring for a child, this reconnect before you drift off to sleep. And what the trick here is you have to make sure you do it. So the next morning, and again, doing things before they ask is actually really sending this message of you're not alone, I love you so much. The next morning, you beat them to it before they even have a chance to ask you. You say to them, I did check on you. I went to bed at 10 o'clock or after my cup of tea or whatever it is, and I checked on you and you were so peaceful and you were hugging your teddy bear or something like that. So it's just very reassuring for the child to follow that process with them. You really want to ease their worries. That's what the goal here is to let them know that you're not far and you are available to them. Again, so we talked about this in the earlier slide, is routine. And the reason is it truly creates a sense of security for our child. And that's what they need in this moment of separation. They need that sense of security to be established for them. And I talked about checking them in and making sure that you do. So absolutely make sure you do check in on them and then tell them a beautiful story about it, right? And why that was so wonderful. All right. So cat naps. So cat naps can be a challenge for some families. I sometimes hear families saying that, they fell asleep in the car and it totally, ruined bedtime and they didn't go to sleep. So you have to play with this a little bit, and it might depend on, is there a change in your child at this time that you will, let a cat nap go, or you're going to potentially strive to keep them awake. It's pretty hard to keep a child awake if they need that cat nap. And I want you to keep that in mind, is that it is actually a need at that point. Then if they are falling asleep in the car for 10 or 15 minutes, that's probably something their body really needs. And what the trick here is instead of preventing it altogether, you're probably better off controlling the length of that nap. So, and that's why I'm using the term cat naps, is because a child who falls asleep in the car after school could potentially end up sleeping for an hour. And you may, at an older age, so 3.5-ish up, say, okay, well, they need this little nap, but I don't really want it to be something that's going to change the whole bedtime routine and make an impact where they're not tired enough at bedtime. You want to find that balance, right? So ideally, when you're talking about not only adult sleep, but a child's sleep, you're having sleep wake ups and bedtimes no more within an hour sort of time flexed around that. So if bedtime is typically 7:30, you really don't want to have anything happening any later than 8:30 to go back to go to sleep. Same with the wake up. You know, we may have a typical wake up on a school morning, let's say at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you don't really want them to be sleeping to, although they're probably not, you don't want them to be sleeping till 9 or 9:30 on the weekend. You want to try and establish a routine where the time is fairly consistent. The other thing around cat naps is it can just take the edge off. So if you're talking about, let's say 10 or 15 minutes, that might be just enough to take the edge off for your child to be able to have the ability without major meltdowns to make it through the rest of his day. So you really have to play with it a little bit and find out what works for your child. But if, like I said, if they're falling asleep in the car or on the couch at 4 o'clock, they might just need it. The other thing that's interesting about cat naps or just naps in general is that our children can be irregular with it. So I'll give you an example from my own experiences with my my youngest. Actually, it was more my older daughter. No, maybe it was both of them. But they both, back when my kids were in kindergarten, they had the school days where you went to school every other day. So every other day, my child was at home with me, and she would nap. But it actually was something she caught up on over time, and it worked for her. So you do have to decide what works for you and your family. Okay, so making the move. The transition from the crib to the bed. So one of the things that we want to talk about here is the age, right? So today we're talking about toddler and preschool sleep, and ideally you're going to keep a toddler into a crib at least until 2.5. The recommendation, just for cognitive reasons and the actual true understanding of stay in your bed, is really not in place or fully established until a child is closer to 3 years old. So if you have a child that is not pushing to get out of the crib, not rushing it, you know, is not climbing out and, you know, putting themselves into a dangerous situation, then by all means, leave them in the crib. There's no rush. A lot of kids like that confined space, that feeling of being secure in that smaller space. So, sorry, I think there's somebody that might need to mute them. There we go. Thank you. So keep them in that space for as long as you can, right? There's no rush for it. If they're climbing out, then you have a safety issue on your hands. So you may have to establish something younger, or I've included some fancy little tricks of, potentially those younger ones that you really need to keep in the crib because they're just not there yet. Here's a pair of jammies in the picture here where you can buy these, but you can also just make them where you've got like a flexible piece of fabric with spandex in it, and you sew it between the legs, and then they actually can't lift their legs apart to be able to climb. So that's one thing. The other thing you're obviously going to do is put the crib to the mattress to the very lowest level. You can also purchase these crib tents. So it's, it feels cozy again, but they're not able to climb out. And then the easiest one, which most kids are using and a lot of kids love, is the sleep sack. So these are just different ways that you can avoid that transition into the bed before you're actually feeling ready. So some of the things to think about when they're moving to the crib is, okay, so what do I have here? So how are they able to verbalize? Like at this age, if your child doesn't have the verbal skills to talk about moving to a big boy bed or a big girl bed, they may not be ready, because not only does it come along with moving into a big girl bed, it comes along with some conversation and rules about staying in the big girl bed. So they need to have some verbal skills in place to be able to have that, a little bit of a conversation with you about it, and some understanding around it. So, definitely what their verbal skills are looking like before you make that transition. Then the other thing that you might want to consider is how you're going to make that transition. So am I going to transition to the bed? Just that's it. Away we go. We're going to do it. And it's a conversation and make it happen. Again, it depends on your child. If they're not so adaptable, or they don't like surprises like that, then you might take the gradual approach. And it might mean that you have a bed and a crib in the room at the same time, so that there's maybe naps in the bed and then overnight in the crib. And it's okay to do it that way. It's okay to do things differently during the day than you do at night, because it's that gradual approach and trying to help them ease into it. So you have to think about what might be best for you and your child. All right, early risers. This is a very, very common situation at this age. And again, this is when maybe a child is climbing out of a crib, or leaving the bedroom and coming into your room, or waking the whole family up and the dog's barking, and it's all kinds of chaos, and it's only 5 a.m. So there needs to be a bigger picture around what early rising is all about. And this may come as a surprise to you, but the most common reason for early rising is the bedtime is too late. So the most common reason for early rising is actually around, my child is overtired. And what that does is it's actually producing cortisol rushes later in the late into, well into sleep, 8-9 hours later, and boom, they're wide awake. So one of the best ways to curb early rising is to try and put them to bed actually just a few minutes earlier. So the other thing that might cause early rising is there's a lack in bedtime routines. So if a child is falling asleep at bedtime and they're falling asleep, let's say, there's a very short routine and they've gone into bed, it's been a long day, and it only takes them 5 minutes to fall asleep, the pressure for sleep, the need for sleep was very, very obvious if it only takes them 5 minutes, but they're not putting a lot of work into actually falling asleep. So sleep actually takes work. So if you even think about your own sleep patterns, now some of us are exhausted and are just crashing into bed, and I completely understand. But sometimes, and I'm sure if it's not right now, you will have experienced times in your life where sleep was work, and you actually had to calm your body down, and you actually had to put thought into relaxing and falling asleep. And we need that to happen for our children. So if the bedtime routine is flowing nicely, and you've got that calming period, and there's a bit of sleep pressure there, and you're watching for their sleepy cues, are they starting to yawn? Are they starting to twirl their hair? Are they starting to whine? Those are messages to us that they're sleepy. So we're catching that perfect opportunity to, this is the best time to go into bed, between 7 and 7:30 on their average day. What's happening then is it should take a child approximately 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes to fall asleep. And what that's telling you is that it's work for them. So if you're able to do that at bedtime, when there is a bit of sleep pressure, but it's not so intense that you just crash, the idea is that when our bodies wake, let's say at 4 or 5 in the morning, and our child has had a really, lengthy sleep at this time, but not enough for their sleep averages, which you're looking at the 11-hour mark, and let's say they woke after 9 hours of sleep, it's really, really hard to fall back to sleep, which is why they just get out of bed, right? I feel pretty good. I've had a good sleep. But we as parents know that that's not enough sleep for them to get through the day. And we don't really want our household waking up at 5 a.m. So if they're doing the work at bedtime, they're much, much more likely to be able to do the work at 4 or 5 a.m. as well. So you really need to keep that in mind. Another reason for early rising is poor sleep environment. So again, I talked about making sure that you've got that consistent environment. What happens at bedtime is the exact same sleep environment that you have at 4 or 5 a.m. The challenge with that, of course, as we head into summer months, the big difference will be there will be light shining through the sides of the blinds or the curtains earlier and earlier in the morning. So if that's one of the things that's interrupting your child's sleep, then, you know, how do you resolve that? Do you put up blackout blinds? Like, what sort of options do you have? So think about that. Early rising is being reinforced. So this just basically means that you give in and it's 5 a.m. and say, okay, well, we're just gonna all get up, even though ideally your child's maybe sleeping till 7. So this is where the parenting piece really comes into place, as to, am I going to reinforce this and just get up? And that's fine if that's what you choose to do. You might have to go to bed earlier than that. Or am I going to really, you know, send the message to my child, it's not time to wake up yet. These are the things, you know, that we're going to be waiting for. We're going to, you know, wait for mommy and daddy to come and get you, whatever it is, however you set that stage, but you're going to eliminate, no, it's not time to get up, and get them back to bed. And then the cortisol rushes may be present at bedtime. So that's when I'm talking about, like, if you've got that calm sleep environment at bedtime, that actually impacts the morning rising as well. So some things to try and correct the early rising, as I mentioned, believe it or not, is to actually move the bedtime as little as 15 to 20 minutes earlier. And I know it sounds confusing, and it makes sense necessarily, but what the sense behind it is you're now eliminating that cortisol rush that will play into the early morning. And you're trying to find that sleepy cue, and that's sort of that sweet spot of when bedtime is, and you may have missed it, and that's what's causing the early rising. So watch for the sleepy cues at bedtime. The other reason, you know, the early rising may happen is that there's not enough of day total sleep. So do they need a nap, that cat nap that we talked about, or do they need quiet time during the day to help them stay calm into the rest of the afternoon? And then the sleep environment improvements. So you might want to consider things like white noise. So that's going to help tune out the birds starting to chirp at 5 a.m, which may impact your child and reinforce the rising. So maybe they're sensitive to that. Or you may need to put some extra darkening blinds as we head into the spring and summer, so that the room stays consistently dark throughout the whole night. And you want to stick to a time and enforce this time consistently, and that's the wake up time. So one of the things we talk a lot about is bedtime, bedtime, bedtime. But I also want to talk a little bit about wake up time. Our children thrive on these routines and are receiving a lot of messaging from us, from the physical cues and the things we're doing at bedtime. They also very much benefit from us giving them strong routines and physical messaging in the morning. So what I talk about in terms of wake up is something called dramatic wake up. And what dramatic wake up is a strong message to your child at, let's say, 6:30 a.m. is the wake up time that you're aiming for in your household. At 6:30 a.m., your child's awake. And if they're not, like, you don't have to go in there and wake them up, but, you know, within a few minutes, you're going to go in there and you're going to make those physical cues. So for a child that's not awake yet, it might be gentle music. It might be you're changing that consistent environment. You're opening up the door, you're turning on the bathroom light in the hallway. And then when they are awake, you do a dramatic wake up. Oh my goodness, good morning. It's so good to see you. And you sing a song and you start your day. For a child that woke up at 6 a.m., but you're setting the stage that wake up time in our household is 6:30, is you're going to bring them back to the bed, put them back in, leave the room, and it doesn't happen this simply, but over time, hopefully, if you practice it over and over and remain consistent, and if the 6:30 is your dramatic wake up time, then at 6:30 you go in your room and you set the message. This is now wake up time. Good morning, and you do your song and you start your routine there. So you want the routine not only at the evening and at the bedtime, you also want it in the morning as well. Super important. All right. So as a gentle sleep coach, what is gentle sleep coaching for kids? So I just want to remind everybody that I'm certified as a gentle sleep coach. So there's all different kinds of sleep training out there, sleep approaches, sleep consultants, and no one person, no one family, nobody's the same. We all do things a little bit differently, but these are some guidelines that are looking at what that gentle approach is. So you're not, shutting the door, letting them cry it out, letting them figure it out all on their own first thing in the morning. Like most things we're doing in parenting, we're doing this together and we're working through the process as a team, right? So preparing for gentle sleep coaching for kids is nothing like doing gentle sleep coaching with a baby. It is completely different. And that's because our children are older, they're verbal, they're interactive, they're more physical. So like we know they can climb out of a crib or climb out of a bed. So the approach in itself is similar, but the circumstances that our children are going to give us are very, very different. So what you might want to do, let's say you have a situation where you have a child that's, you're laying down with them to fall asleep at bedtime, and, it's taking an hour every night, and then they wake up at 2 a.m. and they come to your bed. And so you're trying to, figure out some ways to provide a platform for your child to have more independence with their sleep. What you're going to start with is logging. So take a week and log what's happening, familiarize yourself. Like, we're tired as parents. So, you don't necessarily know how long it's taking them to fall asleep unless you take a week and say, oh, well, Monday night was this and Friday night was this. And you're really establishing what time they're falling asleep. What time did they have lunch? Log the entire day. Really become familiar with what's happening with your child's schedule, so to speak. That's a great place to start, because what that's going to do is it's going to give you a platform to feel really established so that you can move forward. That, I want to fit in an 11-hour overnight, or attempt to get an 11-hour overnight, and my child needs, showing me he needs signs of 1 hour of sleep for a nap during the day. So you're going to, set a schedule and figure it out a little bit. The other thing you can start doing, so again, let's say we're in a situation where we have a child and you're putting him to sleep. You're holding his hand, you're laying in bed with him, you're laying beside the crib on the floor, or laying, whatever it is, you're doing it for them together. And you want to find a situation where your child is supported, but you're not putting them to sleep. So what you're going to do is practice some gentle changes. So you're going to get yourself and your child ready. So is this a situation where we're going to continue using the crib? Or are we going to make the transition, depending on the age, to a toddler bed? So if those are some things that are happening and those are the changes you're putting in place, you want to do that gently before the big day. You're always going to start with bedtime. So all the things we talked about today in our time together, we talked about, the bedtime routine. We talked about having a solid 4 to 5 minutes prior to falling asleep at bedtime. If you start with bedtime, meaning that, let's say your child is waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning and then climbing into bed with you, but they're falling asleep in their own bed at bedtime, start with bedtime of, I'm not going to lay in bed with you to fall asleep, but I'm going to be here. And so what you're looking at trying to do is you're going to set the stage for a process where you're weaning away, but they're still in their bed. You're still there. You're still helping them, but over time, you're going to wean away from putting them to sleep. That's the goal. The next thing you're going to do is create a plan. So like anything that requires a lot of work, and sleep coaching takes a lot of work if our child is fully dependent on us for putting them to sleep. This is a big job. You want to be prepared. So talk to the people in your household, like who's going to be part of this process. Is this something that you're going to tag team with your partner? Does somebody else live with you that potentially needs to be informed that, let's say your mother's living with you and she's got a soft heart and wants to run in, then you need to talk about it in advance. So create a plan, set a start date. And on that start date, you're going to aim for awesome daytime sleep if your child is still napping. Because then they're not exhausted and cortisol rushes coming at bedtime. So if they're still a napper, you want them to have a really good nap that day. So don't do it on a day where you're doing 17 different things around town. You want to make sure that you've got a quieter day so that they're not exhausted come bedtime. That's when they're going to do this new work. Sleep coaching typically will take 2 to 3 weeks of committed work. So what we're doing when we have a sleep coaching process is, instead of now laying beside our child, we're going to sit beside them, and over 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to slowly move away, do less. You're there, you're supporting them, you're sitting beside them, and by about day 3, you move the chair away from them, and you're still there, you're in the room, they'll look at you, they might get up, there'll be all kinds of song and dances going on, they'll try and engage you. Avoid getting into a power struggle, avoid talking at all. You've already done your full bedtime nighttime routine. You said your I loves yous, you said your good nights. If they get out of the bed and they're running around the room, you gently take their hand, bring them back. Do not talk to them. Do not engage with them. And this consistently over and over and over again will set the message that this is my job. My mom or my dad are here to support me, but this is my job. And they'll eventually follow suit, you hope. The gentle weaning away process, it still brings on tears, or for the older child, it might be more verbal, like mommy, 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 or daddy, 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 help me, I can't do it. There'll be a lot of attempts to engage you. So again, just very little to say. There's, we've talked about it, you've done your job, you've put them to bed, just use that physical support. So you'll still be supporting your child's sleep, but you do not want to put him to sleep. That is the goal here. He has to find that sweet spot. Remember, I talked about doing that work. He has to learn how to do the work to put himself to sleep. You're there, you're not leaving him, you're supporting that fear of being left alone. They don't want to disengage with you, but you're not doing the actual sleeping. I'm going to rub your back to sleep, I'm going to hold you to sleep, I'm going to lay in bed with you to sleep. You're letting them figure that piece out a little bit, and they do need time to figure it out. So you might pat and shush, when they're calm, they're laying there, but when they're calm and you're patting and shushing, then you move away. And then if they start to ramp up a little bit again, they sit up, you gently push them back down, like place them back down. I don't mean push, but you place them back down. And, sometimes a firm hand. Think of that, we all love these new weighted blankets. What that's doing is it's like making you feel like you're like zoned in on calming down, right? That's the purpose of a weighted blanket. So maybe your hand is supporting that until they calm down. And then when they're calm, you pull away. And ideally over time, you're moving further and further away from the bed or the crib, and eventually you'll be out the door. That's the goal, right? So that's the part that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. If you do this every night at bedtime, chances are very, very good that skill will now follow into if your child is waking in the middle of the night. So they've learned the skill at bedtime. Now they can apply it naturally in the middle of the night. And then, so when you're doing this, you want to stick to setting daily goals. So if it took, let's say 10 times of rubbing their back over a period of an hour, the next night you in your mind say, okay, I'm only going to rub their back 5 times. And if you set this goal in your mind, I'm only going to do it 5 times, you might actually do it 7, because I find there's a bit of wiggle room in there. So you got to log this. You have to look at what progress is being made night after night after night. And that's really what the gentle sleep coaching is with older children. So just wanted to share with you some resources that we have at the Oakville Parent-Child Center to support sleep and support families that are thinking about doing some sort of sleep coaching or a plan. So we have a sleep resource kit that you can borrow. You can just find that available on our website. There's a section on our website called Early Learning at Home, and there is a sleep kit in there. And the book, so it's the Goodnight Sleep type book, which I have here. You're welcome to borrow it. Is the process that I'm talking a little bit more with a lot more information in the book, obviously. And this is who trained me as a gentle sleep coach. So Kim West is the person who trains gentle sleep coaches, and this is her book and her method in the book. So really, really helpful information if it is something you're thinking of taking on. And then I have in here some of the my favorite stories. So Goodnight Moon and Llama Llama Red Pajama. If you actually, again, if you're sticking to that 4 or 5 minutes of complete consistency at bedtime, children thrive on that. And again, it sets the stage for I'm now going to fall asleep. So if you read Goodnight Moon every night, and that's the book of choice, it can eliminate asking for 17 different other books, right? So you can say, well, Goodnight Moon and Llama Llama Red Pajama, those are our good night books, and we'll read those other books because they'll ask you for more and more and more. Those are our daytime books. So you can find a way to keep that solid routine in place, and these books are my favorite for sure. So that is toddler and preschool sleep in a nutshell. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and check in with Janessa if there's any questions or things that have come through the chat that we can take on.
I don't see any questions right now. Yeah, usually there are questions that, tend to go on during.
Okay.
Actually, I just got one.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I saw something in the chat, but I can't quite see
All
it.
right. So Laura is asking, any tips to help a toddler fall asleep independently when he really wants to breastfeed to sleep and it's time to wean?
Any tips for a toddler who wants to breastfeed to sleep, but it's time to wean? Yeah, so there's many different things that I refer to as sleep crutches at bedtime, and breastfeeding is one of the biggest ones, one of the most common ones, because when our babies are younger, we're breastfeeding them all the time if that's our choice of feeding, or even bottle feeding to sleep. It doesn't matter which one it is, and that's probably the most common crutch. So I think you have to tackle that with 2 different things. You have to either decide if you're ready to give up breastfeeding altogether, and is that something you want to eliminate during the day and the night. But in terms of falling to sleep on the breast at bedtime, this is when I talk about the gentle approach. So it's taking what is typically the sleep crutch. So I talked a lot about laying in bed with the child or putting them to sleep. So you're putting your toddler to sleep when you're breastfeeding them. And that's the piece you have to eliminate if you want to make that shift. One of the best things you can do is make sure, and for your own comfort and peace of mind and sense of, everything's in place, is move that breastfeed to a fully lit room. This is a daytime thing. And then you're going to move in and support now falling to sleep with these new methods of patting and shushing and putting in the plan and doing the work at the bedtime. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. There's no magic trick.
Awesome. Our next question is, Arya asks, do 2-year-olds need naps?
Yeah, so in the beginning stages there, on the beginning slides, we did talk a little bit about what the typical needs are of a 2-year-old. A lot of sleep science actually recommends that napping stay in place till at least 3, if not 3.5. That being said, all children are different. So if you're not actually finding that your 2-year-old is sleeping and taking a nap, I strongly encourage that there be a quiet time, because what you're doing is you're providing the option or the opportunity really is, this is part of our day. And if they're tired, they should fall asleep during that quiet time. And I don't mean like 10 minutes of quiet time with like, whistling toys and this and that, like a true quiet time that if they're going to need sleep, they will fall asleep. I would say that a 2-year-old most of the time benefits from even a short nap.
All right, Maria says that we have a good bedtime routine for my child. The beginning of the routine starts with a bath. Some days we meet a lot of resistance for my son getting him into the bath. I'm not sure if it's resistance to starting the bedtime routine or if he doesn't want to do the bath by himself.
Okay, so it's probably, we talked a lot about how our children at this age are masters of procrastination. And so what your child is knowing most likely at bath time is that what's next to come. And it's in some ways scary and fearful that I don't want to be separated from my family. I don't want to be separated from my parents. And I know I get my jammies on, we crawl into bed, whatever it might be. And it's that separation piece. So I strongly encourage families to be very involved and use some of those techniques that I talked about, reminding the child that you're always going to go and check in and go in 5 minutes and peek in, and they'll probably still be awake, and they'll be so appreciative and comforted. My mom did check in, or provide situations where, like I said, maybe you leave the bedroom door open a crack and you're purposely, singing a song out in the kitchen while you're, cleaning up for whatever it is that the family is moving on to. But that sense of being able to still hear you is very comforting. So I would say that it's this situation of not wanting to separate from you that's causing not wanting to get into the bath.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions.
Okay. If anyone has any other questions or things that they would like to touch base with, then I certainly welcome you to contact me. I'm available at parenting@op-cc.ca. Just to let you know, this recording will be sent to you as a follow-up, and I'll also send a few more resources your way. So thanks for being here today, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.